mysteries here, mysteries concealed by the centuries. The mounds are only the most obvious reminder of an ancient civilization that thrived here 1,000 years ago. Ocmulgee was a crossroads, an ancient intersection, and the prehistoric highway was the Ocmulgee River. The river was a corridor of trade, linking the Piedmont to the Macon Plateau with the coastal plain. For generations and generations, long before the coming of the first Europeans, Ocmulgee was both a commercial and a religious center. It was here that the river met the builders of these massive earthen monuments, the Mississippians. The Great Temple Mound, the Funeral Mound, and the cool confines of the Earth Lodge are only what we see on the surface. Underground is the hidden legacy, finely crafted ceramics, the inscribed seashells traded from hundreds of miles away, and the copper ornaments that speak to archaeologists, even today, of wealth and power. The real story of Ocmulgee began at least 10,000 years ago with the arrival of the first wandering hunters to this land. The Paleo-Indians were nomads, traveling in small bands and living off the land. Life was hard and change came slowly, but inventions like the bow and arrow and pottery would eventually restructure their lives. Almost 2,500 years ago, in the Ohio Valley, early woodland peoples constructed burial mounds and earthworks with huge geometric designs. In Georgia, the woodland peoples built stone effigy mounds, burial mounds, and temple mounds. 1,200 years ago marked the emergence of the Mississippian culture, the construction of flat-topped temple mounds and burial mounds across the eastern woodlands. Georgia offered the ancient Mississippians what they needed: a long growing season for their crops of sunflowers, squash, and especially corn. The Mississippians were a farming people, but this was not a peaceful society. Violence and warfare, it seems, were a part of life. The Mississippians were organized on a massive scale. They had to be. In order to build mounds, thousands of tons of earth had to be moved basketful by basketful. In the Hitchiti dialect of the lower creeks, Ocmulgee meant bubbling water. According to Creek traditions, Ocmulgee was the site of the first permanent Creek settlement after their long migration from the west. And it may be that Creek oral histories are actual accounts of prehistoric events from the distant past, from Mississippian times. There is little doubt Ocmulgee was a prehistoric colony, the first great center of the Mississippians in the south. Their plain pottery was not like the stamp-decorated ceramics of their woodland neighbors. Mississippian narrow-bodied arrowheads were unlike anything else in the region. Perhaps it was these very differences that caused them to build moat-like trenches. Some were specially lined with clay and were dug to the north, east, and south of the village. At one time, trenches may have encircled the settlement, but were they dug for defensive purposes? We can't be sure. With a population of 2,000 or more, Ocmulgee was the largest settlement in the region, and in its time may have been the largest settlement in all of the South. Deep within Ocmulgee's smoke-filled earth lodge, chiefs, council members, and religious leaders sat around a sacred fire, an eagle effigy molded into the floor at their feet. The forked eye of the bird is reminiscent of Central American designs and hints at a possible connection to the Mexican cultures, as do the mounds. The Earth Lodge was a public building, the subterranean capital of Ocmulgee and surrounding villages. Rank and social status were very important to Mississippians. 47 seats line a slightly raised perimeter bench. 3 more seats, including the chief's seat, were molded into the base of the bird effigy platform. The Mississippians were sky watchers and were keenly aware of the solstices and equinoxes. The 4 pillars that once supported the timbered roof are aligned in the cardinal directions, north-south and east-west. In a sense, the Earth Lodge also told time. A long tunnel running exactly east-west linked the Earth Lodge with the outside world. At sunrise on only 2 days each year, February 22nd and October 22nd, a shaft of light sweeps directly over the central fire and illuminates the chief's seat. We can only imagine what ceremonials were held here, what rituals were played out. The Earth Lodge was destroyed by fire about the year 1000. It may have been burned on purpose, as part of a ritual cleansing. Archaeologists have discovered several different Earth Lodges at Ocmulgee. Yet the mounds are the most imposing legacy of the Mississippians. Several are clustered near Walnut Creek and the Ocmulgee River. The cornfield mound stands on what used to be an ancient agricultural field. In early excavations, archaeologists discovered the rounded earth of ancient tilled planting rows. A large building once stood atop the cornfield mound. McDougal and Dunlap mounds are small platform mounds that stood apart from the other mounds in the village. Far and away the most imposing monument of ancient Ocmulgee is the Great Temple Mound. 55 feet high and covering almost 2 acres, it is one of the largest mounds ever constructed by the Mississippians. 3 buildings once stood on its platform summit. It had a commanding view of Walnut Creek and the floodplain of the Ocmulgee River. Little is known about the Lesser Temple Mound, other than it too once had a structure on it. It was partially destroyed by railroad construction in the 1840s. At the western margin of ancient Ocmulgee is the Funeral Mound. Though also disturbed by railroad construction, archaeologists know much more about the Funeral Mound. Excavations in the 1930s revealed that this large platform mound contained more than 100 burials. Log tombs and valued artifacts speak from the past. Chiefs and royalty were among those buried in this honored place. The Funeral Mound was built and enlarged in 7 separate stages. Ancient clay steps were a part of the 5th mound stage. Even separate basket loads of earth could be easily seen during the dig. Treasures were buried, including a copper headdress with 2 copper-clad mountain lion jawbones. Most striking is that the funeral mound was plastered with brightly colored clay when it was used. It was rebuilt and enlarged periodically, perhaps as part of a ritual. After 1100, Ocmulgee village slowly waned. No longer would it echo the sounds of a vibrant, growing society, By the year 1300, Ocmulgee was in ruins, and a new way of doing things. A new culture was thriving in the heart of the river floodplain at the Lamar site, only 2 miles from Ocmulgee's imposing mounds. The swamps offered protection against marauding enemies. Even so, the Lamar site was a fortified town, protected by a wooden stockade. 2 temple mounds flanked a central plaza. One is unique in all of ancient America. A spiral ramp winds toward the top, 20 feet above the flat floodplain. Lamar pottery is highly decorated and quite different from earlier Mississippian pottery, a blend of woodland and Mississippian elements. Incised with deep repeating patterns, Lamar pottery also featured flaring, shouldered bowls. The year 1540 marked the beginning of the end for Lamar culture. De Soto's Spanish expedition of discovery passed through Georgia, leaving a legacy of disease. Ancient America would never be the same. The survivors, the last vestige of Lamar and Mississippian society, would gather to form clan and tribal alliances. To the British, they were known as the Ocmulgee Creeks, and later simply as the Creeks. The Creeks, however, called themselves by a different name, Muskogee. Muskogee Creek culture was, in some ways, a continuation of Mississippian and Lamar society. Like Ocmulgee, the Talwa, or town, was a governmental center and was usually composed of several allied villages. In colonial times, the Creek Nation expanded into a confederacy of about 60 towns. Trade items became all important to the Muskogee Creeks. Manufactured goods changed the way they lived and what they lived for. Carolinians established a trading post sometime in the late 1600s. A shallow moat may have partially surrounded the stockaded walls. The trading post was destroyed by fire in the Yamasee Indian Wars in 1715. One of the first written accounts of Ocmulgee came in the 1770s from pioneer artist and naturalist William Bartram. In awe of Ocmulgee's mounds, he wrote of the very wonderful remains of the power and the grandeur of the ancients in this part of America. Ocmulgee remained a revered place, sacred land to the Creeks. They refused to give up Ocmulgee until they were forced out of Georgia in 1826. What followed was the Creek removal to Oklahoma, their version of the Trail of Tears. But Ocmulgee was still sacred land to the Creeks. In spite of this, in the twilight of the Civil War, battle lines were drawn between North and South at Ocmulgee. Trenches and earthworks were added to the archaeological record. For years, pot hunters dug into the mounds and pillaged the past. Finally, concerned Macon citizens and Smithsonian archaeologists joined forces in 1934 to save and to excavate Ocmulgee. With WPA and CCC crews, the project grew in size to over 800 workers. It became the largest dig in the nation, uncovering the treasures and the hidden story of the ancient Mississippi. Today, Ocmulgee is a vital link in the story of ancient America. Here, it is possible to see into the past, to go back 1,000 years in time and explore the mysteries of the Mounds.